So it's clear that the heroes of Chanukah are the Hasmonean, the Maccabees, Matisyahu and his 5 sons. And the title of the shir is what the Hasmonean kingdom accomplished and what they should have accomplished from a halachic perspective. If you look at the Rishonim, and I mean actually the Rambam and the Ramban, there's actually machlokes, an argument whether it was good that the Hasmonean took in their hands the royalty. There's no question that to begin the revolt, when Matisyahu began the revolt, that was very important. In a place where there's no men around, he's Gabrielios Ish, you have to take the leading role. The question is, was it a good thing that the Hasmonean continued? And maybe they should have given it up after the Nes Chanukah. So the Rambam is very clear, and we'll learn the Rambam first. Rambam feels that one of the miracles of Chanukah was that the kingdom, the Jewish kingdom, the rule of Eretz Yisrael returned to the Jewish people. This is the Rambam, Hilchos Megillah, Chanukah, Perek Gimel Aleph. The Rambam begins with a story. V'vayishen, during the time of the Second Temple, Kishemalchu Yovam, and Greece ruled, Gozru Gzeros Yisrael. So they enacted decrees on the Jewish people against the Jews. Uvatlu datam, and they tried to mevatel, to erase, to remove the law of the Torah. They didn't allow the Jews Torah mitzvos to be involved in Torah mitzvos. Upashtu yod monam, and their hands were stretched out in their monam against the money of the Jewish people, uvenosem against the daughters. V'nichnasu lahechel, they came into the sanctuary, the Beis Hamikdash. Ufarchu bo protztim v'taharos, they did terrible things to the Beis Hamikdash, and they made what was Torah tamei. V'tzor lahem yishol neim, and they oppressed the Jews, v'lachatzum lachatz gadol, and there was terrible pressure, terrible oppression, until HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the God of our forefathers, went ahead and redeemed them, v'oshia miyodam, and saved them, v'yitzilam, v'bigavru b'nei Chashmonaim kohanim v'gedolim, and the Chashmonaim were misgaber, they were victorious, Hargum, and they killed the Greeks. Voshio Yisrael miyodam, and saved Jews from their hands. Vemidu melach mina kohanim, and they put into place a king from the Kohanim. V'chozra malchus Yisrael yeshlam v'sayim yishana churban hasheni, and the royalty, kingdom, kingship returned to the Jews until the destruction of the temple, until the destruction of the Second Temple. Now, I would just begin, this is fascinating, this Rambam is obviously quoted, not just in regard to Chanukah, but just to realize that most of the kings from the Hasmonean kingdom were not tzaddikim. I think that's an understatement, by the way, all right? Some of them did terrible things, but the Rambam says the fact that there's Jew ruling Eretz Yisrael, so that was one of the miracles of Chanukah. Just to keep in mind that sometimes things are not perfect, but we have to recognize the Yeshua, the salvation, even when things are not perfect. But that's not the point of the shir. The point of the shir is the Rambam seems to really express the idea that the fact that the kingship returned to Am Yisrael, even though the people that were the kings were Kohanim, and not from Shevi Yehuda, not descendants of David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech. That was one of the miracles of the Chanukah, and the Rambam stresses the fact, not just that Chazra Malchus Yisrael, but also that Midu Melech Min Kohanim, that the king came from the Kohanim. So there's some problems with that, but my uncle of Yoshabir Soloveitchik explained that why. Okay, understand the fact that Chazra Malchus Yisrael, that now the Jews had the rights to rule over Israel, but why does Ram emphasize the Kohanim, the priests, the Kohanim Gedolim? And my uncle explained that the Bach says, you have to always ask a question. Sometimes when we see that there is oppression that faces Klal Yisrael, we have to ask, why did this happen? So the Bach suggests that the reason why it happened was because at that time the Jews had weakened in their avodah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, avodas HaMikdash, and because of that, the base HaMikdash was taken away for a temporary small amount of time. However you define what small is. And therefore having the Kohanim who were ruling Eretz Yisrael, so the Chazal felt Rambam felt was a very special thing, because they would actually try to enforce and to emphasize the importance of the avodah. But the Rambam clearly here says that it was a good thing. It was impressive. It was something to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu for, that Chazra Malchus Yisrael, that the kingship came back to the Jewish people Jews ruled over Yisrael until the destruction of the temple, and even though they were not from Sheva Yehuda, this is something to give Shevach V'Odah praise and thanks to Kadosh Baruch Hu for. So what I'd like to do in the shir is really to understand the Shittas HaRambam. So if we look, the Rambam, according to the Rambam, is there a problem if you have a king that's not from Sheva Yehuda, from the tribe of Yehuda? According to the Rambam, is there a problem if the Kohanim are kings? Let's try to understand the Rambam. So the Rambam in Sefer HaMitzvos, when he talks about the halacha of who you appoint as a king, this is Mitzvah Slosa Say Shin Samach Beis. The Rambam says HaMitzvah Shin Samach Beis, the negative commandment, 362nd commandment, is that we have to make sure to appoint a king that has to be from Zerah Yisrael, has to be Jewish. We can't appoint a king that's not from Zerah Yisrael. And even if someone is a convert, a Ger Tzedek, the fact is to be a king, you have to be a born Jew. Who amru lo sucha lases ishnachri, and this is the pasuk in Parsha Shoftim, Sefer Devarim. You're not allowed to place upon yourself an ishnachri. Asher lo achichu is not your brother, and it's a mitzvah to say. And then the Rambam says v'chein shara menuyim. Other appointees, Eino Mutter, Shenimne Aleinu Be'inyam Minanyanim, Lo Minu Torah, whether you're appointing somebody, to be a leader in Torah, Lo Minu Malchus, or to appoint somebody to, and in terms of the royalty, Ish Shahaya Mikal Gerim, Ad Shetiyo Im Yisrael, he has to have a Jewish mother. Sometimes Melech Melech Hervachecha. It's interesting that we know, so what Rambam says is that you can't appoint a convert, even a Ger Tzedek, even a Minui Torah, to be a leader in Torah. However, we know in our history that there were two very great Gedolei Hador, Gedolei Chachamim, that were Gerim, Shmaya Bavtalion. And as a matter of fact, Hill would sometimes, quote Shmaya Bavtalion in the exact Havara. Because they were Gerim. We know sometimes a person who is not born Jewish, right, can't pronounce letters the way a born Jew can. It's like, for example, I have a name Chaim, so it was always interesting. I was used to it already. In elementary school, all the teachers that were not Jewish, right? My name was not Chaim. They couldn't do Chaim. It was always Chaim. That was the way it went. Okay, so Shmaya V'Talion, we're told, had some challenges with that. So how could it be that Shmaya V'Talion were in the Siyum? So I think someone was showing and point out that when it came to a vote, they weren't involved in the vote. I think my father told me in the Shem of Moshe, his father, that it's true, there's a halacha. But the Gadol Hador is a ger. How can you not appoint the Gadol Hador to be the Nasi? That's what he said. That's what he says. I think this we'll understand this as we get along. It was an exception because if you're talking about you have a few people that are candidates, right? Okay, so you appoint the person that's not the ger, not the convert. But if someone is a Gadol Hador, they are the premier Gedolei Hador, Shmaya V'Talion war, they would have to be the Nesiim. That's how my grandfather explained it. All right, let's go on. Then the Rambam says, well, how about, so the Torah says you can't appoint the convert. Well, how about Malchus Beis David? So look at the Rambam. The Rambam goes on and says, Omnam, HaMalchus Levad, Kvar Yadata Miksuve Sifrei Nevuah. We know that who was Zoch, who merited to Malchus from the Jews? It was David HaMelech. And he says, Keser HaMalchus, the crown of royalty, Zocham Bo David. And also his descendants afterwards, Ad Sof Kol Adoros. All right, Ein Melech, the Rambam uses very strong words. Ein Melech lemisha yamim Toras Moshe ben Shalom, Adon Kol Neviim. So there's no Melech to someone who believes in Toras Moshe ben Shalom, Adon Kol Neviim. Elam Mizera David, even though it was Nevi'im that emphasized the whole idea that the Malchus belongs to David. However, someone who believes in Toras Moshe, the Rambam says, has to believe that the Melech has to come from Zera David, Zera Shlomo Levad. V'chol mishehu mizula zazar nichvad l'nim Malchus nachri karinim beit. The Rambam says if someone does not come from Malchus Beis David, he's called a nachri in regard to Malchus. Kemoshe kol mishehu mizula zera Aaron, just like someone who does not come from Aaron but is a Jew, is a stranger, is a zar when it comes to kahuna. If someone is not from Malchus Beis David, based on the Nevi'im, the Rambam says he is not he's considered a stranger in Nachri. And then he explains what we're explaining. So we see, so now the Rambam is very clear that you can't have a melech who's not from Malchus Beis David. So how come the Rambam was so impressed with the fact that the Hasmonean were the kings until the Churban Bayesheni, the destruction of the Second Temple? Let's look at the Rambam Yad HaChazaka where he explains this halacha. So Rambam Yad HaChazaka, Parak Al Halacha Ches, like this. He says, Navi shehemid melech mishar shiftei Yisrael. A Navi. So obviously you need a Navi to come along and to anoint a king who's from Shar Shiftei Yisrael. And this melech goes in the way of Torah and mitzvos. And he fights the wars of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hareze melech, he is a king. Mitzvahs hamalchus nohagas bo, and all the mitzvahs of the king are knowing you have to treat him like a king, give him the honor of the king. Even though she'ikar malchus leDavid, that the main family of royalty comes from David, v'yem ibanav melech, and his descendants should be the king. He says, Shahari achia hashiloni hemid Yeravam. So how do we know that you can have a Navi from another Shevet? And as the Rambam says, a melech from another Shevet. And as the Rambam says, that not only can have a melech, a king from another Shevet, however, the fact is that the line continues. So we know that after, when Shlomo HaMelech did what he did, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu was, HaKadosh Baruch Hu anointed, at that point, Achia Shaloni, one of the Nevi'im, went and appointed Yeravam Nevat and told Yeravam that after Shlomo dies, he would become a melech. So he says, "Va'amar lo v'yeh," and what did Achia Shaloni tell Yeravam Nevat? V'aya im shemoa tishma. As kol asher tzavecha, listen to whatever I command you. Uvanisi lochabayis neman kashin lis David. You will have a house that will be reliable, that will continue like I did for David. For Amar lo Achia v'livno etein shevi, and Achia said v'livno on the son of David HaMelech, which would be Rechavam. Etein Shevet Echad, I'll give him one tribe to rule over, besides Shevet Yehuda, which is his own tribe. He would also rule over Shevet Binyamin. Leman Heyos near LeDavid Avdi Kol Yamim Yerushalayim, in order that David should still have a semblance of a kingdom in Yerushalayim. So therefore he said, David's family will still be a king of Shevet Binyamin, Shevet Yehuda. He says, but you will have the Asaras Hashvatim, the 10 tribes. So the Rambam says we see clearly that you can go ahead and you can have a king from a different tribe. And this king from a different tribe, the line can continue. As Achia Shiloni told Yeravam, Uvanisi locha bayis neman. Okay? So then if you look at the next halacha, Parak Al Halacha Test, at source number 4, the Rambam goes on. The Rambam says, Malchei Beis David heima omdim la'olam. Malchus Beis David, they will stand for eternity. Shenemar, as it says, Kisacha yanachon ad olam, your throne will be firm forever. Avol im yamod melach mishar Yisrael, but if a king will stand from the rest of the tribes, tifso kamalchus, the malchus will end mi beso. How do we know? Shari nemer li Ravam, because Achia told you Ravam, ach lo kol yom, not all the days. So the Rambam, in source number 3, Halacha Ches, points out that you can have a king from a different tribe, and the Rambam says that the line will continue. The Rambam Halacha Tes says that Malchus Beis David is eternal, the other lines are not eternal. So the Ravid says he doesn't understand. Look at the third line of Halacha Tes. The Ravid says, Zesoser. This contradicts Masham Lamaila, what he said above. Below Malchus Bilvad. See, Azvadai Kainhu. So what does that mean? So he says, what would have happened? What should have happened? We know that Yeravam was Choti Umachti as Yisrael. He sinned, and he caused the Jews to sin. He put up 2 calves in Israel, and he caused the Jews to sin. And because of that, that sort of started that eventually his line was lost to the kingdom. But let's say Yeravam would have been a big tzaddik. Let's say Yeravam would have said, you know what? I realize my role. And he says, for that reason, I am going to be the king because Klal Yisrael needs me. And I'm going to do what's good for Klal Yisrael. And I'm going to let the Jews go to the Beis HaMikdash because that's where the Jews have to go. And I'll increase Torah learning and I will watch out for them. So what would have happened? So the Ravid says, yes, his kingdom would have been eternal. And it says, what does it say? He says, Ilu Hayu Yeravam Melech Kosher. If Yeravam was a kosher king, Uvanav Ksherim, and his sons would have been kosher, Lo Hoisa Malchus Posekes. His Malchus would not have stopped. Mizaro, Aval Hoisa Shnil Malchus Beis David could go in Kesar, Uplag Kesar. He would have been the assistant king. Okay, I think there's a medrash that HaKadosh Baruch Hu told Yeravam, do tshuva, and you and I and Beis David and Ben David will walk together in the garden. And he said, well, who will be first, right? And it turned out David would have precedence. So because of that, but that's what would have happened. That's what would have happened. So the Ravid says that it would continue on some level, and that's really pshat in the psukim. How the Rambam seems to contradict himself. So let's look first of all at how he says how he explained it. So if you look at the Radvaz in source number 5, the Radvaz says like this. He explains the question of the Ravid. He says on one hand the Rambam says a king not from Malchus Beis David will continue Kol Hayamim. And on the other hand he says in Halacha Tes he says that a king from that's not Malchus Beis David will not continue. So the Radvaz says like this. The Radvaz says, he says that what's the difference? The difference is like this, that if, he says, that if the Malchus Beis David and you have a Melech that won't keep Torah mitzvos, so he says, I'm sorry. So the Radvaz says that according to the Ravid, it depends. In other words, if those who are not from Malchus Beis David go ahead and they do something which is wrong, the kingdom will end. But Malchus Beis David always stays in the family of Malchus Beis David, and even if they sin, it might sort of be suspended for a number of generations. They'll come back to Malchus Beis David. And the Radvaz points out that according to the Rambam, you should know according to the Rambam. The Malchus, a king from the other tribes will not continue. So we still have to stay playing the Rambam, because on one hand the Rambam says they will continue, and on the other hand he says they won't continue. So I'd like to explain the Rambam. Before I explain the Rambam, what I want to do is do the Ramban, and then we'll come back to the Rambam. So the Rambam, the Ramban is a Ramban on Parshas Vayechi. So in the brachas that Yaakov Avinu gave to the Shvatim, so the bracha that Yaakov gave to Yehuda was Lo Yashar Shevim Yehuda U'Mechoker Ben Raglav Akiyav Oshilo V'Lo Yikas Amim. So the scepter will not leave from Shevi Yehuda, and the Rambam says that this is a halacha that the Malchus has to be in Shevi Yehuda, and the Rambam is very clear about that. Now the Ran says it's not halacha. The Rambam says it's more like a bracha, so it's not really a problem. The Ramban says no. That Yaakov Avinu said is in the Torah that the Malchus cannot leave Shevi Yehuda. So therefore, if you're going to go ahead and you're going to have a king that's going to be the Melech, you're going to have a king that's going to be a Melech. So then if you're going to have a king that's from a different tribe, that's going to be a problem. What happened to Achia Shiloni? Okay, that was a Navi. A Navi is allowed to do that, but just regularly to go ahead and to appoint a king from a different tribe, that's problematic. So if you look at the Ramban is very important. Ramban says like this: this was the punishment of the Chashmonoim. Shemochu v'ayishen, they were kings during the second temple. Ki hoyu chasidi elyon. First, the Ramban talks about the 5 brothers. Now, I point out the Ramban is not speaking against the kings that came after the Chashmonaim. He's not talking about Yochanan Horkanus, that was the son of Shimon, I believe. He's not talking about Alexander Yanai, who was a character. He's not talking about the sons of Alexander Yanai, who were Tzedukim. The Ramban is talking about the 5 brothers, the 5 Maccabee brothers that saved Klal Yisrael. And he says they were Chasidi Elyon. V'ilmoleihem, and the Ramban says it wasn't for them. Nitztaku Torah mitzvahs mi Yisrael. We would not have Torah mitzvahs anymore. V'yafal pikein, and even so he says, Nenshu onish gadol, they were punished terribly. Why? Because after the revolt and after Nes of Chanukah, Yehuda stayed in his role. And by the way, Yehuda stayed in his role. I don't think he was formally appointed a king, but he acted as a king. He was the general. He was in charge. And he says, the Ramban goes on. He says, because the four sons of the Chashmonaim, the Zakin, HaChasidim, HaMolchim, Zachar Zeh, who ruled one after another, and different brothers ruled one after another until they finally drove the Greeks out of the land. Im kol v'rasam v'atzlachasam, of all their power and all their success, naflu biyad oivehem, all the brothers except for Shimon fell in the hands of their enemies b'cherev. V'yagia ha'onesh b'sof, and it began there. In the end, it got to a point, Lamash Amru Chazal, like Chazal say, that Kol Man Da Amr, anyone who says Meish Chashmonoyi Kasina, come from the Chashmonoyim, Avdahu, he's really an Eved because the whole family was wiped out. So Ramban asks, how could they have all been wiped out? And Ramban asks, how is it that 5 brothers, they're right, and even Shimon, who became the Nasi, he also, I believe, was killed. Shenichrasu Kulam Bavon Hazeh. Even though the descendants of Shimon, they were punished because they were tzedukim, why did Matisyahu lose all his descendants? Because of this. Shemolchu v'lo hayu mizera Yehuda beis David. V'yisira Hashem legamre, they removed the scepter and the stick and the staff. By your onsha mida keneged mida Hashem Shechadish Baruch Olam asavdeyem v'hem hichrusam. And this is mida is mida because when Hakadosh Baruch Hu, he says that Hakadosh Baruch Hu went ahead and they shouldn't have become kings. So Hakadosh Baruch Hu put their slaves over them and he wiped them out. See, so the Ramban is very clear. If someone who is a king not from Malchus Shev Yehuda, it's against the Torah, and this was the punishment. Just a second, it's Ramban says, okay? This is Ramban says. I want to deal with this Ramban. And he says, yes, the tzaddikim later on, but the first 5 brothers, they were tzaddikim chasidi elyon. And why were they all wiped out? Because they took the kingship. We'll try to explain the Ramban. The Eksher gam kain shaya alehem chetem achusam, and it could be that the other reason why they were punished is not just because they were they weren't from Malchus Shev Yehuda, but they were Kohanim. And he quotes the Yerushalmi, and the Yerushalmi says, you don't anoint the king from the Kohanim. And the question is why? So Rabbi Yehuda Ansurya says, because the pasuk says, Lo Yosef Shev Yehuda, and Rabbi Chia says, Laman Yarech, because he quotes juxtaposition. It says, the king, Laman Yarech Yamam Malchuso, that he should elongate his days. Amamlachto, on his kingship, Hu of Anam Israel, and immediately afterwards it says, Lo Yakon Leviim. So he says, so we put it together to show that you should not have kings who are from the Kohanim. So the Ramban says that even though the Jews will at times have a king from other Shvatim, as is needed, Kefi Tzorach Hashah, a moshchin osam shelo yalem hod malchus. Right? So he says, what do you mean? You're allowed to go ahead of a melech. Sometimes you need it. Look what happened to Achia Shiloni. He anointed Yerav Minavat. So he says, Kefi Tzorach Hashah, you're allowed to have something, but you shouldn't treat him like a king. Ela k'moshotim v'shotrim. And he says, and the reason why he mentions Kohanim is because even though a Kohen is able to have Mashiach, to be anointed because of his Akuna, but you shouldn't think that's an allowance for a Kohen. So the Ramban is very clear, and he's very extreme about this. You can't have a king that's from Shev Yehuda. And the reason why Kohanim are mentioned, singled out, is because you might think, well, maybe you can anoint a Kohen because already he's a Kohen, so he's allowed to get the Shevan Mishcha. So Ramban says, no, you can't do it. So Ramban says that he feels that was that was a mistake, and Rabbi Chia says that according to the Torah it shouldn't be there because it's juxtaposition, and that's the Ramban Shita. So you have machlokas between the Rambam and the Ramban. According to the Rambam, not only was the Hatzolah, the salvation of Jews, Chanukah time, a good thing, but the fact that there were Hasmonean kings and Jewish kings who were Kohanim, it was actually very positive until the Churim Bayesheni. According to the Ramban, no, it was pretty negative. I think according to the Ramban, what probably should have happened is like this. I think what should have happened is, again, I don't know, but according to Ramban, so they had the rebellion. Why did they start the rebellion? It's very simple. There was no one else there. So Matisyahu decided, I'm going to start this rebellion. And Baruch Hashem, they got back Yerushalayim, the Beis HaMikdash, and there was still a lot of work to be done then. But still, I think Ramban would feel that at that point, once they had the Nes of Chanukah, there was such a high, Yehuda should have given it over. Yehuda should have given it over, the Malchus, just like, for example, when the Bnei Beseir were in Nisim, the princes of Klal Yisrael, and Hillel came into town, they gave over the Nisius, the princeship of the Sanhedrin, to Hillel. So the Ramban feels they shouldn't have given over, and because it wasn't given over, all the brothers were wiped out until Shimon. That's what the Ramban feels. The Rambam says, not only does the Rambam not agree with the Ramban in regard to the brothers, the Rambam says, whatever was going on, it was a good thing that we had kings who were Jews, even though they were Kohanim, until the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay, so let's try to understand. What? They weren't? There wasn't Shem Mishra. No, I'm not talking about Shem Mishra. I'm just saying, in other words, I just mentioned this. The Ramban says the reason why the Torah makes juxtaposition during the time of the first bias, you might think that maybe it's okay to have a Kohen to be a Melech because he has Shem Mishcha anyways, right? But Ramban holds it was the wrong thing not only to have a Melech, from the Hasmonean after everything settled down, but even after the Nes Chanukah, according to the Ramban, Yehuda should have given it up at that point. Okay, so now. I'm not sure. Let's focus on this. I'm sorry, I don't know. So let's go on. This is before Ashkenazim and Sephardim. So let's go on. So now if you look at the Even HaOzel, he says the Even HaOzel says that the difference between what does the Rambam mean? So he says what the Even HaOzel says, and this is very important. That what the Rambam holds is like this. The Rambam says that what's the difference in Malchus Beis David and a king from a different shevet, a different tribe? It's very simple, as I mentioned before, that a king from a different tribe, so once they sin, they're finished. It's over. Malchus Beis David, so if they sin, all right, he says, and then they do tshuva, the kingdom will go back and will be restored to Malchus Beis David. So let's look at the psukim first, and then try to explain what happens. So if you look at source number 11, this is the story of Achia Shiloni appointing Yeravan, and he tore a shirt into pieces to show that the kingdom of Israel will be torn up. And if you look, he says, and Achia Shiloni says to Melach HaMalach, Perikid Aleph, Chosek Lamed Hey, says to Yerav Nevat, I'm going to take the Melucha Miyad Beno, and I'm going to take the kingdom from the hands of his son, and I'll give you the Aser Shvatim, the 10 tribes. Livno, and to his son, Etain Shevet Echad, and to his son, to Rechav, and I'll give one tribe. Leman Heyos near LeDavid, so David will have a kingdom still in Yerushalayim, Abdi Kol Yamim, Yerushalayim, Ha'ir Asher Becharti Li, Lasum Shmisham, the city that I chose for me to place my name there. And you I will take, and you will rule according to what you want. You will be Melech Yisrael. As kol asher etzavcha, if you listen to whatever I command you, v'alach darki, you go my way. V'sista yashu beinai, you do what's right in my eyes. Lishmor chukosai, v'sosai k'shasta v'avdi v'yisa, imach u'v'nisi l'cha bayis neman, kashir b'nis l'david, I will build for you a house which will be reliable. He says, v'nasad l'chas Yisrael. He says, and then he says, lamates, v'en ezera David, and I will afflict Zara David through this, Laman Zos, Achlo Kol Hayamim. So the truth is what the Rambam said, right? The Rambam said that that it will be a reliable house for you, and then he says, but it's not forever in the next halacha. And Ravid said, Rambam contradicts himself, because in the first halacha Chesed seems to imply in Hilchos Malachim that it can be continuous forever, and in the next halacha the Rambam says it's not forever. Truth is the Pesukim, because if you look at Pasuk Lamed Ches, he says, Bayis Neman, but in Lamed Tes it says, Lo Kol Hayomim. So what does the Radak say? So the Radak says, how does the Radak explain Kol Hayomim? The Radak explains Kol Hayomim like this. What does it mean? He says, yeah, in other words, what it means that I'll give you Bayis Neman, it means for a long time. If you are a tzaddik, which you know Ravim wasn't, and you act properly. The Radak explains, Asida lachzor limosa Mashiach. He says, the Malchus returned to Beis David when Mashiach comes, b'mei Melech HaMashiach. As it says, Shenemar v'asisin leitz echad, that the Jewish people will come together as one tree. V'melech echad yeh lekulam. V'omer avdi David melech aleihim. He says, and then the Radak says, and this pasuk is a tshuva for those that say there won't be Mashiach. Why? Because the Navi said to Yeravim, won't be Kol Hayomim. What does that mean? There'll come a time when Malchus Beis David will rule over all of Klal Yisrael. That hasn't happened yet. So if you want to see where the Navi is saying there will be a Moshe Mashiach, it's right here. That's what Radak says. But Radak says, in other words, when the Rambam goes ahead, when the pasuk, when Echir Shaloni goes ahead, and Echir Shaloni says that it's going to be, you'll have a biased never, a reliable house, will applies to continue, and it says, Achlo Kol Yom means like this. I need you for a certain purpose. There's a reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu will appoint you now. Okay? And for the reason that you're supposed to be appointed, you'll be reliable as long as you're a tzaddik. But once that ends, then it's going to return, it's going to revert to Beis David. And that's Pshat in the Pasuk. In other words, I need you. He says, V'nislocha bayis neman. You'll have to build a bayis neman. And why? Because I need you for a reason. It could be 100 years, it could be 200 years, it could be 300 years. But once that ends, then we'll go back. Achlo kol hayomim. It doesn't mean that eternally it will stay in your family. The Ravid says you could have stayed in your family. You would have been an assistant king. But according to the Rambam, the way he explains Pshat in the Psukim is, it's not going to go ahead and stay eternally in your family. But I need you for a reason. It could be this reason will exist for 100 years. It could be for 200 years, 300 years. As long as the reason exists, it's yours as long as you act properly. We know we didn't do that. And that's why, so when the Rambam, see, he says, when the Rambam goes ahead in Hilchos Malachim, Perek Aleph Halacha Ches, he says that, the Rambam says that that his Banav can be a king, a king that's not from Shevet Yehuda. That's as long as it's needed. However, in Perek Aleph Halacha Tes, so then there he's talking about that at the end, some point, the reason why a different Shevet was appointed, a king from a different Shevet was appointed, will not be relevant, and at that point, the kingdom will revert to Malchus Beis David. That's how my father explained Pshat in the Rambam and Pshat in the Psukim. So now, so what do we see from here? My father said, so the question is, what happened at the time of Echir Shaloni? Why was there a reason to appoint a king from a different Shevet? Very simple. Malchus Beis David was not acting the way they should have acted, right? And therefore, Betur Onesh, as a punishment, they had to have a king from a different tribe, and this is actually implied in the pasuk, because the pasuk says in pasuk Lametes of Malachim Perek Aleph, "Va'anez Zera David, I will afflict Zera David." However, once that ends, once Malchus Beis David is already on the straight and narrow again, of course the kingdom will be removed from you, because the kingdom has to belong to Malchus Beis David. As long as the kingdom of Beis David needs someone on the side that's going to be there to be like a rod to keep you in line, then it can be in your family if you act properly. But once Malchus Beis David it starts to act properly again, and is on the straight and narrow, at that point, the Malchus will return totally to Malchus Beis David. So the question is, and let's bring it back to Chanukah. So it's fascinating when you come and look at Chanukah, just to understand. So I would assume that the Ramban would hold that even if there's a temporary reason, according to the Ramban, the Malchus still has to be reverted, it has to be in the hands of Shevet Yehuda, according to the Ramban. However, the Rambam would say, as long as you have a reason, and a good reason, that right now it has to be in the hands of a different Shevet, then it's okay. And that's why the Rambam was very impressed, and he expressed the nace that occurred, that the Malchus reverted, came to the Jews, even though it wasn't to Malchus, it didn't go back to Malchus Beis David. If you look, it's fascinating, source number 13. Source number 13 is from the book of the Maccabees, the first book of the Maccabees, Sefer Maccabeim. And I will just point out that Sefer Maccabean, the first one, was probably written around the time of the Nes Chanukah, or I would say maybe after the time that Shimon became the Nasi, and historically it's considered to be accurate. Okay, why? Because obviously the closer to the event you write it, the more historically accurate it is. And it's what happened. So when Shimon became the Nasi, so first of all, they didn't refer to Shimon as a king, they referred to him as a Nasi. And what does it say there? Vayi'ilu kol haYehudim v'Kohanim, and everyone there, all the Jews and the Kohanim wanted, Liyot, this is Sefer HaMakkavim, the first book, Shimon, Nasi, v'Kohen Gadol Aleim, Kol Yamav, Shimon to be a Nasi and a Kohen Gadol all the days, Ad ki yakum Navi emes v'Yisrael, until a true prophet got up in Yisrael. So when Shimon became a Navi, and that's right, Shimon became the Melech, or the Nasi I should call him, so it was on the condition they're waiting until a Navi comes. Until a Navi comes. And once a Navi comes, a Navi would be able to go ahead and decide who should be the king. Now, I have to tell you, I was thinking about this last week. Let's say, Lu Yitzur, okay, in our wildest dreams, all of Klal Yisrael today, all the Jews that get together as one unit, okay? And we come back to Eretz Yisrael, we're ready to build the Beis HaMikdash, and we want to appoint a king, okay? We want to appoint a king, okay? And we all agree, okay? And we have to go ahead and we have to find a king from Malchus Beis David. Okay? Could we just appoint anybody who we know, or they say came from Malchus Beis David? Now, by the way, there are a lot of people that come from Malchus Beis David. Okay? But truth is, I haven't met any in a number of years. I think they say that all the Lubavitcher Rebbeim were from Malchus Beis David. There was a Rav, a Talmud Chacham in Chicago, Rabbi Ugent. He had Dor Achador, a generation that he came from Malchus Beis David, from Shalom Melech, son after son. Okay, so unfortunately, his whole family was wiped out. But obviously they're around. So someone comes and says, "I have in my family a contract that I come from David HaMelech. Could we appoint him to be the Mashiach, the Melech Yisrael?" And so, Shev Yehuda. The answer is no. Why not? Because in order to go ahead and appoint somebody, what do you need? You need a chazakah, okay? So if there are Kohanim in this room, there's a chazakah, some chazakah, they're Kohanim. Because why? Because I guess people have duchened over the generations. Is the chazakah and Levium, okay? So I'm a Levi. I have a chazakah that I'm a Levi. What's the chazakah I'm a Levi? I guess because I wash the Kohanim's hands sometimes. I'm not sure. But you can argue about that, let's say. But because, but he says, but there's no chazakah that anybody is from Malchus Beis David. There's no chazakah. However, during the time of the Bayis Sheni, the Second Temple era, there definitely was a chazakah, because we know the first who came back to build the second Beis HaMikdash that was the descendant of Malchus Beis David. One of the leaders was Zerubbabel, and I'm sure they knew. Listen, if they know, right? I can trace back. I know who I came from 10 generations back. I'm sure they knew during the time of the Second Temple who was from Zerubbabel. So you don't really need a Navi, right? However, what does it say? It says here that they appointed him to be a Nasi, Ad ki yakum Navi emes mi Yisrael. What do they need a Navi for? Just appoint somebody already. What's the answer? Probably the answer is that there was a reason. As my uncle says, another reason, they needed a melech from the family, the Hasmonean or a Nasi. There was a reason. Maybe because someone who inspired the Jews to take the Avodah in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple more seriously, someone who had the ability to strengthen Eretz Yisrael, whatever the reason was, there was a reason. Okay? However, once a Navi comes, then the game changes. And you have to go ahead and you have to know, what's the next stage? What's the next stage? So this is what they were ready for right now. So according to the Rambam, it was a good thing because we needed them. And when we did not need them, so I think they felt when a Navi would come. Now, what would be the next stage? So if you look at source number 14, it's a pasuk in Chagai. And when Chagai first came in the scene, he wanted the Jews to build the Beis HaMikdash. And he says, Perik Beis, and he says, Gadol yiyeh kavod habayis hazeh ha'achron min harishon. The honor of this Beis HaMikdash will be greater. The last one from the first one, Amar Shem Tzvakos, u'v'makom hazeh tinshonu v'Shem Tzvakos. In this place, I'll give peace. And all the Mefarshim asked the question, How could you say the second temple greater than the first temple? In the first temple, they had the Urim V'Tumim, they had the Aron HaKodesh, they had the Shemen HaMishcha, they had all these things. What? Nisim Gluyim. So Gemara Chazal explained, well, in two ways it was greater. How was it greater? Number one, the first Beis Mikdash stood for 410 years. The second one stood for 420 years. And also, some of the measurements were a little greater. That's what they explained. That's the Temple of Hortus was greater. It's fascinating. The Barbanel goes in a whole polemic. Why? Because supposedly the Christians want to use this to say, what are they talking about? They're talking about the rise of the Oso Ish, right? That's Gadol Yiyah. So the Barbanel goes in a whole polemic to basically to disprove what they say. However, if we look at Ibn Ezra and then the Malbim, so Ibn Ezra says like this. He says, Rabbi Moshe Omar, Ki zeho al Tanai. You know how it'll be Gadol Yiyah covered Abayis and Rishon and Achron? This is al Tanai. If the Jews will be tzaddikim, he says, then Kasher Amar Zachariah Vayim Shamoa Tishmu. Then it'll be Gadol. The Malbim, and the Malbim actually says this. The Malbim says like this. He says, the Malbim that Liya Kesef Sha'oz Yakiru Kulam Kila Keseko Shali. And they'll bring people to Yerushalayim, and then the Gadol covered by some Yerushalayim. Right? Because why? Because in this temple, the second temple, will be the last Bayis HaAchron. And that place will get peace. And it won't be amongst you Sinas Chinam. And that's really what caused Goran Bayis Sheni. And the Malbim says, this is what I want to point out, Lefize, Chagai Perek Beis, Kol HaMaimer Zehu Tanai, it's all a condition. Im Yavo Od Ruach Achas, if another Ruach comes, V'hu Im Yasas Adaber Shekara Simon B'Tzeis Mitzrayim, Az Yehu Abayis HaAchron. He says, She'ein Achra Bayis. What Chagai was saying is, yes, it could be greater. Right, when it says this bias will be greater, so there's really two roads you could take. You could take the road which happened to end, where it lasted a little bit longer. Or if Klal Yisrael had risen to the occasion, so then the second bias would have been the last bias. He says, Kolonis Kaima Tanai, but the Tanai was not fulfilled, the conditions. V'lo yesham makom, because unfortunately there was sinas chinam, there was unwants of hatred, and there were people who didn't keep their mitzvos. So then this promise was not kept until the bias ha'achron will be filled. But the Malbim is very clear. It was a Tanai. In other words, the point of the second temple was to bring the second temple to completion, where the second temple would be the third temple. So I would want to suggest that the Hasmonean is something great, but maybe the Hasmonean should have come to the next stage. Now, if you look, and I'll finish off with this. Actually, two more points. So in the Haftorah of Shabbos Chanukah. So Zechariah sees this vision of the two olive trees next to the menorah. He doesn't know what's going on, and the Malach says, he says to Zechariah, Perik Dal the Pasukei, Vayana Malach Adovervi, Vayomer Lai, you know what's here? And I said, I don't know what's here, Zechariah says. And he says, Vayana, so what do you say? Zeh Hadover, this is the thing, Var Hashem, Oz Rubav Lemor. Lo b'chayv lo b'koach kim ruchim Hashem tzvakos. Lo b'chayv lo b'koach. So I want to express how Reb Chaim Brisker explained this Haftorah. It's a very, very sublime Haftorah. And maybe say something a little bit different. Reb Chaim said like this. He says, they're looking at this vision, and he sees the olives, and he knows the olives represents the Shemen HaMishcha. So Zerubbabel says, I don't understand what's going on here. This is the second base of Mikdash. I know there's not going to be oil, and there's not going to be Shemen HaMishcha in the second base of Mikdash. So I don't know what's going on. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu Navi say? Lo b'chayo b'lo b'koach. HaKadosh Baruch says, Kim Baruchi. What does that mean? So in other words, Zechariah was thinking, yeah, there's not going to be Shemen HaMishcha, and then when there's destruction of this temple, the Kedusha will end, and therefore you didn't understand what Shemen HaMishcha has to do with the second base of Mikdash. The oil of anointing. However, what HaKadosh Baruch is telling the Navi is this Kedusha is not going to end. What does that mean? In other words, when the Jewish people came to Eretz Yisrael in the time of Yeshua ben Nun, there was certain sanctification of the land. That sanctification ended when the Jews were exiled. Why? As the Rambam explains, because since they sanctified the land by conquering, when they were conquered, what happened to the Kedusha? It went away. The second base of Mikdash, they didn't come with an army. They came in, and the land became theirs because they worked hard, sweat and tears, and hard work. So that ownership can never be taken away. You can't take away sweat and tears. You can't. So therefore, the Kedusha always remained. And that was the message that the Navi gave. That was the message the Navi went ahead and gave Zechariah. He says, you don't understand what this is about? What you are doing today is going to last until the Yemos Mashiach. But, so, and that's lo b'chai v'lo b'koach kim beruchi. It's my spirit, and therefore the Kedusha will never be suspended. I was thinking maybe you could suggest something a little differently. That maybe what the Navi was telling Zechariah was like this. There's no question that the Jewish people understood at that time that the second temple might not last. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says that. And that's why when they came back to rebuild the second Beis HaMikdash, the Anshe Knesset Hagdola, the Great Assembly, made many takanos to make it easy for us to survive in Galus. All the tefillos we have and the brachas we have really stem from their takanos at that point. He said, however, we could change. It's in the hands of the Jews to change things. And therefore Zechariah looks and Zechariah says, I don't understand. I see what's going on. I don't know if it's going to last. What's this idea of the Shemen HaMishcha, the olives? It doesn't make sense. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Lo b'chayil v'lo b'koach, kim beruchi amar shem tzvakos. You never know. You look at the situation, you're despondent, you think that, it's going to be 420 years, and we're going to go again until the third redemption. But never underestimate the power of koach and ruach, what koach and ruach can do. Never underestimate that power. And therefore, it could be that this will somehow or another, just come into and create the Gula Shlema. It's up to you to see what you do. And the truth is, this koach and this ruach, Kim Beruchi Amar Hashem, this ruach, that's what overtook the Jews at the time of the Nes Chanukah. Because they lost all hope. They're ready to give up. There are certain Jews who said, it's it. It's all closed up shop. But he says, this ruach can change the world. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Zechariah. Don't be despondent. This actually might last forever. So it's possible to suggest that maybe the Hasmonean did a great job to L'churim Bayasheni, but we weren't prepared to change the second Beis HaMikdash into the Gula Shlema. Now, I can't suggest how it would be done, but it's always very important to see how things go in stages. If I can digress for a second just to explain. Okay? Just to explain. So, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, I should say, or maybe a political scientist to say that right now there's something wrong with the way we elect our government here, okay? And I'm certainly not one to go ahead and explain what's wrong. However, as we know, there's something going on, that's it's not working. It's not working. However, my father, in the 1960s, when he gave a shiur about Medinas Yisrael, he referred to Medinas Yisrael as the Mafteach LeGeula, the key to the Geula, the key to redemption. What does that mean? With this key, we can either open up the redemption on the door, or we can go ahead and shut it tight. That's what he said. He says, in other words, Medinas Yisrael was, in a certain sense, is like what happened in time of the second Beis HaMikdash. This could bring a situation where we actually could bring the Geula. And we have to know when things change and when our perspective should change. So, living here already, sure, not as long as many of you, for over 20 years, I have to tell you that, in my mind, things have changed so much. What does it mean things have changed so much? Yes. There's no question. There's a lot of negative press. Unfortunately, many cities are running buses on Shabbos, and it seems like, from a perspective of people living in Chutz La'aretz, by the way, which I just heard recently, it seems like we backtracked. For a person living in Eretz Yisrael, actually, it's not that way. I was at a wedding a few weeks ago, and there at the wedding, I was sitting at the same table as a journalist. I have to basically put him in a group just for the purpose of the message, and in the Haredi world. But he was an Anglo, so I was able to speak to him actually. And he was telling me that they want he said the Haredi to go into army, but if the army is not going to be accommodated, they're not going to go. And he talked about the problems in the workplaces. So I said, no, I'll ask you a question. I said, to me it seems like the people who are making all these rules are actually scared. Why? Because the country has changed, and the country's changing. I said, I told him, my son, when he was in Givati, my son told me that from the very bottom until just the very top, every officer above him was Dati. Every officer. Except for, I guess, I don't know what you call him, but the head of Givati, okay? And that's why when Ophir Vinter was put up to position, they didn't take him. Why? He's Dati, bottom line, because they're, why? And by the way, if you see the picture, I saw a picture recently, they were sitting discussing something. Many of the people sitting around the table with the army clothes on are wearing kippot. And you know, the fact of the matter is that you should know that, yeah, the buses are running, they're running buses on Shabbos. I want you to know, it's a last-ditch effort. Why? Because we are holding, I believe, we are holding in very special times where it's time, yes, we have a Medina, we have a state where Jews can come to, and the state has definitely become more religious. Even people that I would say are not religious. There's a certain emunah on Kadosh Baruch Hu. You know, during a Aseret Tshuva, I was called. I'll finish on time. During Aseret Tshuva, I was called to go down to the police station. I had to give testimony for something. All right. Now, one of the things that I had gone 2 weeks before, and they said to me, "You have to wait 2 hours." I said, 2 hours? Who has 2 hours to wait? I left. I don't know if you can do that in America. So then they called me one morning. Where are you? I said, I'm actually at the teacher shir. We have to come. I said, I don't have 2 hours to give you. He said, you come right now. We'll see you right now. Okay. So I got someone to take the first class from me. I run down to the police station. Had my car that day, so it was good. And this lady who, maybe it's not right, I would not describe her as being dati, the way she looked. I didn't ask her if she's Shomer Shabbos. And she says to me, what do I do? So I told her, I'm a Rab Beit Knesset. She looks at me and she says to me, you're a Rab Beit Knesset? Does that mean you give brachot? So the truth is, I never thought that was my role. I said, okay, I give brachot. Okay, fine. Anyways, the chakira ends. I said, can I go? She says, just a second. She takes me into a room with her friends, who, by the way, I would also say did not look exactly, again, I don't know if there's Shmir Shabbos, what's going on. I didn't ask them. She says, you can't leave until you give us all brachot. Okay, now there are people who are very good at giving brachot. You know, I'm not so good at giving brachot because, unless I know somebody. So what am I supposed to say? So I said to them, whatever you daven for, I said it in Hebrew, of course, and you need, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give you. And I heard this resounding amen, and they were so happy. There's an emunah on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's an appreciation. We've reached a role where we're ready for the next step. We have to realize, and what's going on right now, it's sort of like, I'm not sure why it's happening. But if the Hasmonean should have taken the Jews to the next step and done like the Malbim says, or maybe Yeruchi is overtaking the country, we're ready for the next step. I just want to mention, and just to finish off, I mentioned this in the second shir I gave in Beit Avichai. It was the Chanukah shir, and there I mentioned that Rashi, certainly according to Rashi, I saw my uncle said this, that he said that that if you look at the Gemara, source number 18, that Lashana Acheres, another year, they kavum v'asum, they made it Yom Tov v'halo v'hado. So after Nes Chanukah, a year later, they made it Yom Tovim to say Hallel, and Rashi says Hodah is Al Nisim. What happened to Hadlachas Neiros? Where's Hadlachas Neiros? So my uncle pointed out, and he quoted in the footnotes to Avnei Nezer, said this, I spent years looking for Avnei Nezer, haven't found it. So it must be, it was Al Pi Shmua, that the Hachiyuv of lighting Hadlachas Neiros happened before the Churban. And if you look in Josephus does not mention it. Okay? Does not mention it. That's what the Gemara says. And that's why there was a lot of confusion. Do you do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1? What do you do? Why? You didn't need the menorah. Why not? Because they had a menorah in the base of Mikdash. At the time of the Nes Chanukah, they weren't sure yet that there would be a Churban. Because there was a certain spirit that took over Klal Yisrael. And the goal of Hasmonean was to take the spirit, and they did a great job. They brought Torah back. They brought mitzvahs back. But if the spirit could have brought Abbas Yisrael back, it would have made the biggest difference in the world. And I think that if that's the crossroads that we're at now, Medinas Yisrael is a temporary resolution until the Melech HaMashiach, till the Malchus, towards the Malchus Beis David. In my humble opinion, we're at a crossroads right now we're ready to go to the next stage to bring the Geula Shlema, and hopefully, of our tefillas, we have to daven, and actually, I would just add on by emphasizing the importance of the things which are unfortunately not being taken care of in this country, enhancing our Shmira Shabbos, enhancing our Siyas and Mitzvos. That will help bring us to the next stage, and hopefully we should get to that stage where, which we somehow we missed out on during the second base of Mikdash, we can actually come to the Geula Shlema. Everyone should have a wonderful, safe, warm winter and a happy Chanukah. Yeah.